On a cold December night in 1968, two teenagers parked their car on a quiet lover's lane in Benicia, California, hopping for a peaceful evening together. Within minutes, they would become the first confirmed victims of a killer so calculating, so taunting, and so elusive that his identity would remain one of America's greatest mysteries for over 55 years. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer, a man who terrorized San Francisco, wrote cryptic letters to newspapers, claimed to have murdered 37 people, and then vanished without a trace, leaving behind only fear, frustration, and questions that haunt us to this day. December 20th, 1968. Lake Herman Road, a secluded area just outside Benicia, California. 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 17-year-old David Arthur Faraday were enjoying what should have been an innocent date night. Betty Lou was a vibrant cheerleader with her whole life ahead of her, while David was a popular student athlete planning to attend college the following year. They had parked David's mother's Rambler station wagon in a gravel turnout overlooking the lake, a spot known locally as a lover's lane where young couples often went for privacy. At approximately 11 o'clock that night, another vehicle pulled up behind them. What happened next would launch one of the most extensive and frustrating manhunts in American criminal history. The killer approached the car and immediately opened fire. David was shot point-blank in the head as he tried to exit the vehicle to confront whoever was approaching. Betty Lou managed to escape from the car and ran desperately toward the road, but the killer pursued her relentlessly. She was shot 5 times in the back from a distance of approximately 28 feet. The precision of the shots suggested someone with firearms training and a chilling lack of hesitation. Passing motorist discovered the horrific scene just minutes later. David lay dying near the car's rear wheel, while Betty Lou's body was found on the pavement about 30 feet away. David was pronounced dead at the hospital shortly after arrival. The brutality was shocking, but what made this crime truly terrifying was its apparent randomness. There was no robbery, no sexual assault, no obvious motive whatsoever. The killer had simply murdered 2 innocent teenagers and disappeared into the night. Local police investigated extensively, but found few leads. The crime seemed motiveless and carefully planned. Witnesses reported seeing a white Chevrolet sedan in the area, but that was all they had to work with. The case began to grow cold, and investigators feared they might never find answers. They had no idea that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would grip the entire Bay Area. 7 months passed. July 4th, 1969. Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, California. 22-year-old Darlene Farron and 19-year-old Michael Majo sat in Darlene's brown Corvair in the parking lot, approximately 4 miles from where Betty Lou and David had been murdered. It was just after midnight, and they were talking and enjoying the warm summer night. Without warning, a car pulled up beside them, and the driver immediately began firing a 9mm Luger handgun through the window. The attack was swift and merciless. Darlene was shot 5 times and died at the hospital. Michael was shot 4 times, but miraculously survived, though he was critically injured. The killer drove away, seemingly satisfied with his work. But then something unprecedented happened. At 12:48 in the morning, just minutes after the shooting, Vallejo Police Department received a phone call. A man's calm, emotionless voice spoke clearly. "I wish to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to a public park, you will find the kids in a brown car. They have been shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." The call was traced to a payphone outside a car wash, but by the time police arrived, the caller was long gone. This was the first time the killer had directly contacted authorities, and it represented a disturbing pattern that would define the Zodiac case. This killer wanted attention, wanted credit, and wanted to play games with the police. Michael Majo, despite his severe injuries, was able to provide investigators with the first physical description of the killer. He described a stocky white male, approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighing around 200 pounds, with a large face and short, light brown hair. The man appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s. It wasn't much, but it was something. August 1st, 1969. 3 Bay Area newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, each received identical handwritten letters. The letters were typed on a manual typewriter and began with the chilling words, "Dear Editor, I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl last 4th of July." The letter writer provided details about the crimes that only the actual killer could have known, including specific information about the ammunition used and the positions of the victims. But what made these letters truly extraordinary were the encrypted messages attached to each one. The killer had included 1/3 of a 3-part cipher, a total of 408 symbols that, when combined, would supposedly reveal his identity. The killer made a bold demand. "I want you to print this cipher on your front page by Friday, August 1st, 1969. If you do not do this, I will go on a killing rampage Friday night that will last the whole weekend. I will cruise around and pick off all stray people or couples that are alone, then move on to kill again, until I have killed over a dozen people." The newspapers, working with police, decided to publish the ciphers, hoping it might lead to the killer's capture. The FBI, CIA, and NSA all attempted to crack the code, but it was actually a Salinas school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty who solved it within a week. The decoded message was disturbing and grandiose. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all the people I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name, because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife. The cipher revealed the killer's twisted psychology, but not his identity, exactly as he had promised. This cat-and-mouse game had only just begun. September 27th, 1969. Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, were college students enjoying a quiet picnic on a small island connected to the shore by a sand spit. It was a beautiful, peaceful afternoon until a man approached them wearing one of the most terrifying costumes witnesses would ever describe. The attacker wore a black executioner-style hood with clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes. On his chest was sewn a white circle with a cross symbol, what would later become known as the Zodiac symbol. He carried a gun and a knife, and he spoke calmly as he approached the terrified couple. "I want your money and your car keys," he told them in a flat, emotionless voice. Brian attempted to comply, hopping to end the encounter peacefully. But money and car keys were never the real objective. The man pulled out a length of clothesline and forced Cecilia to tie up Brian. Then he tied up Cecilia himself, testing the bonds to ensure they couldn't escape. What happened next was one of the most brutal attacks in the Zodiac case. The killer pulled out a knife and stabbed both victims repeatedly. Brian was stabbed 6 times in the back, while Cecilia was stabbed 10 times. The attack was savage and prolonged, with the killer showing no emotion whatsoever. When he was finished, he calmly walked to Brian's car and drew on the door with a black marker the same circle cross symbol, along with the dates of his previous confirmed attacks and this new one. Then he did something that would become his signature. He called the police himself. Using a payphone, he reported the crime in that same calm, emotionless voice. "I want to report a murder. No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Karmann Ghia. Brian Hartnell miraculously survived his injuries, but Cecilia Shepard died 2 days later at the hospital." Brian's eyewitness account provided investigators with more details about the killer's appearance and behavior, but it still wasn't enough to identify him. October 11th, 1969. San Francisco taxi driver Paul Stein, 29 years old, picked up a passenger in the Union Square area. The passenger asked to be taken to the intersection of Washington and Maple Streets in the Presidio Heights neighborhood. When they arrived at the destination, the passenger shot Stein once in the head with a 9mm pistol, killing him instantly. The killer then did something that seemed incredibly risky. He tore off a portion of Stein's bloodstained shirt, apparently as a trophy or proof of the murder. Witnesses from nearby apartments saw a stocky white male in his 30s wiping down the cab and searching through the driver's belongings. They called the police, and officers arrived on the scene within minutes. Due to a communication error, the responding officers were looking for a black male suspect rather than a white male. They actually encountered a white man walking away from the crime scene, likely the killer himself, and let him go after he claimed to have seen another man running in the opposite direction. It was a tragic mistake that allowed the Zodiac to escape once again. 3 days later, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter that began with those now infamous words, "This is the Zodiac speaking." It was the first time the killer had used that name, and it would become the moniker by which he would be known forever. Enclosed with the letter was a piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt, proving beyond doubt that the letter writer was the actual killer. The letter mocked the police for their incompetence, describing in detail how he had escaped right under their noses. "The SF police could have caught me last night if they had searched the park properly instead of holding road races with their motorcycles, seeing who could make the most noise." Over the following months and years, the Zodiac sent more than 20 letters to newspapers and police departments. Some contained new ciphers that have never been fully decoded. Some claimed responsibility for murders that may or may not have been his work. He claimed to have killed 37 people, though police could only confirm 5 murders and 2 attempted murders with certainty. The Zodiac's letters became increasingly bizarre and theatrical. In one particularly disturbing letter sent in April 1970, he included a new cipher known as the 340 cipher, so named because it contained 340 symbols. This cipher would remain unsolved for over 50 years, finally being cracked by a team of codebreakers in December 2020. The decoded message revealed the killer's narcissism and contempt for society. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me." Some letters included bizarre demands. In one, the Zodiac demanded that people in San Francisco wear buttons with his symbol on them, threatening more violence if they didn't comply. In another letter, he included a detailed diagram for a bomb he claimed he would use to blow up a school bus filled with children. Whether this was a real plan or simply another attempt to terrorize the public remains unknown. The Zodiac also seemed to enjoy inserting himself into popular culture. He referenced the musical The Mikado and claimed that his name was hidden in one of the ciphers. He sent a Halloween card that featured dark humor and threatening messages. He even designed his own button with his cross-circle symbol and sent it to newspapers. But perhaps most disturbing was his apparent ability to simply stop and disappear. The confirmed Zodiac murders ended in October 1969 with the death of Paul Stein. The letters continued sporadically through 1974, with the last confirmed Zodiac letter arriving in January of that year. After that, silence. Complete, total silence. Over the decades, thousands of suspects have been investigated and several individuals have been seriously considered as possible Zodiac killers. The most famous suspect was Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher who died in 1992. Allen matched the physical description, owned the same type of weapons used in the attacks, and wore a Zodiac brand watch. A search of his property revealed disturbing items, including bomb-making materials and weapons. Several witnesses identified him, including surviving victim Michael Majo, who picked Allen out of a photo lineup decades later. However, despite all the circumstantial evidence, investigators could never definitively link Allen to the crimes. His fingerprints and handwriting didn't match those on the Zodiac letters, and DNA testing performed after his death was inconclusive. Allen maintained his innocence until his death, and the case against him remains frustratingly incomplete. Other suspects have included a convicted child molester named Rick Marshall, a former lawyer named Richard Gaykowski, and even a comic book artist named Robert Emmett Graysmith, who became obsessed with the case and wrote best-selling books about it. Though Graysmith was later cleared and is now considered one of the foremost Zodiac researchers. In recent years, advances in DNA technology and forensic genealogy have given new hope to solving the case. In 2020, a team claimed they had identified the Zodiac as a man named Gary Francis Post, who died in 2018. However, law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, have not confirmed this identification, and many Zodiac researchers remain skeptical. The Zodiac case has had an enormous impact on American popular culture and criminal investigation procedures. It has inspired countless books, documentaries, and films, including David Fincher's acclaimed 2007 movie, Zodiac, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert Downey Jr. The case has become a cultural touchstone, representing the perfect unsolved mystery, intelligent criminal, taunting communications, multiple victims, and decades of frustrated investigation. The case also changed how law enforcement agencies handle serial killers and threatening communications. The Zodiac was one of the first serial killers to use media as a tool for terrorizing the public and manipulating the narrative around his crimes. His methods influenced how police approach similar cases today. For the families of the victims, however, the cultural fascination offers little comfort. Betty Lou Jensen's sister, Debbie Perez, has spent decades seeking answers and justice for her murdered sister. Brian Hartnell, who survived the Lake Berryessa attack, has lived his entire adult life marked by that horrific afternoon. These are real people whose lives were forever changed by a killer who apparently murdered for entertainment and ego gratification. Today, more than 55 years after the first confirmed Zodiac murder, the case remains officially unsolved. The Zodiac Killer was never caught, never prosecuted, and never identified with certainty. He may have died decades ago, taking his secrets to the grave. Or, in a truly disturbing possibility, he he may still be alive somewhere, an elderly man who got away with murder and terrorized an entire region with complete impunity. The questions continue to haunt investigators and amateur sleuths alike. Who was the Zodiac Killer? Did he really kill 37 people as he claimed? Or were his later letters simply the boasts of a narcissist seeking continued attention? Why did the murder stop after Paul Stein's death? Was the killer imprisoned or hospitalized for something unrelated? Did he die? Did he simply move away and start over somewhere else? Perhaps the most disturbing question of all: could the Zodiac have been stopped? If the officers who encountered him after Paul Stein's murder had been given the correct suspect description, would they have apprehended him that night? If investigators had taken certain leads more seriously, could they have identified him before he disappeared? These questions may never be answered. The Zodiac case stands as a stark reminder that sometimes, despite our best efforts, despite advances in technology and investigative techniques, some criminals simply get away with their crimes. The Zodiac Killer wanted to be famous, wanted to be remembered, and in that terrible goal, he succeeded completely. As long as the case remains unsolved, the Zodiac will continue to fascinate and terrify us. A faceless phantom who proved that evil can be both theatrical and absolutely real, that intelligence can be used for monstrous purposes, and that sometimes the most frightening mysteries are the ones that remain forever unsolved.